Hello, it's good evening here in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. And for those who are just coming online, you'd probably be aware that I have friends above me in the Northern Hemisphere. That's why they've been placed above me. And so those who are familiar with it, my co-host is Andrena, Forrest. And in the middle there is another cohort from the land of dragons in St. George, none other than Geoff Stray. So Andrena, take it away, mate.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, wherever you are in the world, or if you're listening to the replays. Would just like to say thank you to everybody that sent me healing vibes and good wishes, because I had some sort of funny little virus for this lasted a little bit longer. So I really appreciate all the good wishes that were coming my way. And I'd like to say hello to Yvonne in Adelaide. She's our supporter every week. But most of all, I would like to welcome Geoff Stray from Glastonbury. Through a series of synchronicities, different people said to me, you need to get Geoff on the show. So anyway, I followed different links and what have you, and it wasn't happening. And then one day my sister was down in Glastonbury doing something or other, and she bumped into Geoff. So then we had a meeting and we had lunch together, and I bought a couple of his books and we talked about tunnels and all sorts of things. So through that meeting, here we are with the lovely Geoff, who's going to share so many different things. I'm not quite sure where to start because I don't know how many people are aware of all the tunnels that are linked in Glastonbury underneath, from the Abbey, from the Georgian Pilgrim. I mean, it's just a network. And there's lots that are being closed down completely. So I don't really know enough to share anymore. So I'd like to hand it over to you, Geoff. And I know you started an interest in tunnels from an early age, but you came across this a bit later in life, I believe.
Hey, before you do that,
Yeah.
I just got something here that might be of interest to Geoff himself to show how Glastonbury, and particularly the tour and the mystical aspects of Glastonbury, has focused in American TV. Yeah. And I just want to bring your awareness to this here. And it was called Stargate SG1. And it was season 9. And it was the first 2 episodes of season 9. It was about Avalon part 1 and part 2. And it goes into all the myths and mythologies, but more importantly, what's inside the tour. And they had some sort of magnetic field resonance to actually map of the tour and all its tunnels. And really? So with that, yeah. So there it is on the screen there. Interesting concept. And so now we've got this whole myth and mythologies of Stargate 1 and the travel through the portals to different worlds. And now we've got the Reggie Didge Geoff, who's over in Glastonbury, who's unearthed these tunnels that the American producers have been talking about. So there you go, mate. Yeah.
Take it away, wow. Geoff.
There, you're on the spot now.
Right. So yeah, I've been here in Glastonbury about 15 years, and I heard the rumours when I arrived here, and there was an A4 book edited by what's his name? Anthony. Ooh, what is his second name now? There it is. Yeah. Yes, Anthony Roberts. Yes. There we are. And there's a chapter in there by Anne Pennick about the underground tunnels here. And yes, as you say, having had a lifelong interest in underground tunnels, they had them in the town where I grew up, which I never actually found them. But, and then I moved to Hastings. I grew up in Haywards, Linfield, near Haywards Heath, which is It's in Sussex. It's just sort of north of Brighton there, somewhere around there. Yeah, left a bit. Yeah, Bluebell Road. Yes, it's going to. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, you're right on it there. Yeah. So, yeah, there were supposed to be tunnels that go from the River Ouse up to the church in Lindfield. It's a little village near there. Oh, you can just see it to the north. That's it. And yeah, I sniffed around in the graveyard. Never actually found the exit, but they used to take the smuggled produce it to the pub next door called the Tiger Inn. And anyway, then I went to Hastings, and they've got smugglers' tunnels there, which have been they were used. There's a massive, great chamber in the centre where they used to have discos in the 70s, and you were not allowed to go too far away from the central chamber though, because you could get lost in them. But you can go in them. They've opened them up as a sort of tourist attraction now. St Clement's Caves they're called. But and after that, I got a job in the in Hastings drainage department, and I was in charge of the sewer records. So I discovered, pinpointed about a third of the town's sewers, which they hadn't got them on the records at all. For the when you do a search, when you buy a house, you need to know where the underground services are, and that they didn't have a complete set of records, so I had to go out with a metal detector to try and find the buried manhole covers and then get them dug up by the road crew. So yeah, I went down a few of those as well. That's another story. Anyway, yeah, when I got here, I was quite fascinated by these tunnels. So I I managed to get an interview with the curator of the Abbey, because they're all centred around the Abbey. And the most famous one that people know about is the one that goes from the George and Pilgrim pub to the Abbey. And when I had an interview with this curator, he wouldn't accept that even that one existed. I thought that they were all just made up stories. But I could see that they didn't want people digging holes in the Abbey. You see, this is something I'd come across before in, and when I was looking into various things in France, I found that there was a guy there called Gérard de Sède who wrote a story about buried treasure in a chateau called Gisors. And when I visited there, I had a chat to the curator there, and he said after this book came out, which was a bestseller in France, it was like people coming from all over there digging holes in the place until it got to the point where the chateau started to crack, and they had to close the whole place down and dig a big shaft and fill it with concrete. Oh. But then that was their story, you see. They could have been looking for the treasure.
Yeah.
It was the army who did it, apparently. But anyway, so you got this whole secrecy thing that goes along with looking into this kind of thing, because people don't want you delving in their back gardens and going down their basements.
Yeah, but they could find the treasure there, couldn't they, at the bottom of the garden?
Well, yeah. There is that facet, you see, because the Abbey did have it was the second richest abbey in the country at one point. And this is why, at the time of the dissolution of the abbeys, they were one of the last ones to be dissolved. So they had about 4 years warning. And they say that it was 1539 when they got as far as Glastonbury. But in 1535, that's when they say that the golden altar gates were removed and secreted away, when they began to realise that Henry's mob were going to come down and gut the place. So yeah, they've been given gifts from all the Saxon kings, and many of whom are buried there. And you can, when you go into the abbey, you can ask for the little map, which tells you where all the burial sites are, but they're not actually marked unless you get this map. You don't know where they are. But yes, I think it's about 8 Saxon kings buried there. Was it 6? Depends if you count King Arthur, of course. That's the most controversial one. But yeah, so if you go into the Georgian Pilgrim, you'll see a picture on the wall of Bligh Bond. You've got a picture of Bligh Bond that I sent you there. As you sit in the window seat in Glastonbury Abbey and look in the Georgian Pilgrim and look back to the pub, you'll see these 2 paintings. One, that's him. One is Frederick Bligh Bond, and the other one's Catherine Mortwood, who's known as Mrs. Oxo Cube, because her husband was the Oxo Cube millionaire, and she started the whole story about the Glastonbury Zodiac. But those pictures were painted by Yuri Leach, and Bligh Bond was the archaeologist who was employed by the Church of England to investigate the abbey after they bought it in auction at the beginning of the last century. And unknown to them, Bond was a member of the Society of Psychic Research. And in order to facilitate his finding of lost artifacts and chambers, etc., he got into a bit of automatic writing. It's a kind of seance where you have 2 people who, one of them's holding a pen, and they touch hands and kind of both look away and ask questions, and the hand then scribbles out answers to the questions, and the pen never leaves the paper, and it can draw diagrams and everything. And by that method, Bond discovered the whereabouts not only of Arthur's grave, but the long lost Edgar Chapel and the Loretto Chapel, I think was the other one. Things that have been rumoured to exist, but no one knew where they were. And the monks actually drew diagrams of where they were, and he dug them up to the amazement of everybody, quite quickly. So he was getting good results fast. You can see the Edgar Chapel on that picture there, right at the top of the diagram. That's it there. The other chapel he found, the Loretto Chapel, is on the left arm of the cross, just below there. It says Loretto Chapel. So those are the 2 chapels that were lost that the monks told him the whereabouts of, and as well as Arthur's grave. And I managed to get hold of. Well, you can get hold of a lot of the books that he wrote and articles he wrote, which are not so easy to get hold of. And it transpires, a lot of this stuff that was written by the monks is all written down. When the authorities found out about it, they weren't happy about it. It was about 1921, I think, when he brought his first book out that mentioned that he'd got this stuff by doing seances. And there was a controversy to do with that Edgar Chapel, because he said he was convinced from what the monks had said that there was an apse on the end of it. But mainstream archaeology didn't agree with that, and but he was so convinced of it that he kind of he reconstructed the apse on there. They knocked it all down in the end, and that was more of a controversy than the fact that he was doing these seances. But he ended up being sort of banned from the site for several years. But it does make fascinating reading. the stuff that came through, and this is where the whole story of the underground passages started. And it's interesting to look at the original articles from which Anne Pennick got her story, because there are a few bits in there that don't really make sense. And when you look at the original articles, you can see why, because there's one sentence where Bond is talking about 2 tunnels and he switches from one to the other, and Pennick got obviously confused as to what he was talking about, and she ended up with a diagram showing a tunnel that was halfway between the 2 that he was actually talking about. But I've managed to speak to lots of witnesses over the years who've been down these. That picture you can see there, that's a series of photos taken by someone that I call speleologist T.
Yeah. Can you explain?
Yeah, there's supposed to be a legend has it that there's a tunnel that goes from the well, St Mary's well in St Mary's Chapel there, that goes from that chamber all the way to Street, which is hard to believe because it would have to go under the River Brue across the levels, and that area was before the monks got people in from Holland to drain the marshes. That lot was like a shallow inland sea. But I mean, a lot of these passageways were built late in the day anyway. So anyway, legend has it that the other end of this tunnel comes out in the street. Well, that is, I've been down it, and those were some photographs taken by someone else who'd been down it, but you're not really allowed down it. You see, that's another of the things with this kind of investigation is you end up trespassing. So now this is another of the tunnels. I've managed to get down 3 tunnels and seen an entrance to a 4th. So this one is the White Spring Tunnel, which was built. Let's look at the size of that spider at the top there. They're huge. These spiders. The bodies are the size of a 1-pence piece, and when you take the lid off this well, they all come charging out everywhere. And so this is another of the hazards that you're up against, as well as bat parasites and general stories of weird entities like yetis and Gwynap Nud is supposed to be the god that dwells inside the Tor. That picture there, Gwynap Nud is the
that's
one of the gods of the underworld. Yeah. And his throne room is supposed to be underneath the Tor, and there's a story about St Colin, which we've probably nicked from Wales, where he was a hermit living on the Tor, and some servant of Gwynap Nud told him that he'd been invited to go and have a visit with him, but he kept refusing, and then they insisted in the end, and he went along in there and then insulted them all and then threw holy water around, and the whole place disappeared, and he was back on the Tor again.
And I think most people, they would like to know what's under a Glastonbury Tor. That's a mystery.
Well, those green pictures there, you see, I took those with those are stills from a video, which is infrared video, which you go down that well, which is in someone's back garden, and it's behind the White Spring, and it's a Victorian bricked well, but it's actually built inside a cave that was there from antiquity. But at the other end of that passageway, there's been a collapse. Now, I spoke to someone who went down there 40 years ago, and they told me that collapse was there when they went down there, and it's all covered in calcite. It's like a slippery white icicle, this thing. It's quite difficult to get up, and when I got up there, I mean, I had a camera in one hand and a shovel in the other hand, and I should have had a one-piece suit on, but I kept getting the buckle of my jeans all caught up as well. It was quite a struggle to get up and down that bit. But when you get to the other side of that, there's a little cavern at the top there, on top of the boulders that form this rockfall. And 40 years ago, my informant told me that he got down the other side into a passageway where there was two arched doorways, one going steeply up and one going steeply down. But I spent about an hour in there trying to get rid of all the accumulated clay that had come in under pressure and stuck to all the walls. There was nowhere to put it because it's such a small place. I ended up just scooping it up and throwing it at the wall, so it stuck to the wall. But yeah, I couldn't find any way of getting through out of that space. So it seems that a further rockfall in the last 40 years or more or perhaps more than one rockfall have further blocked the access through. Now, the interesting thing about all that is I asked Rory, who is I think you may have had him on here, haven't you, Rory Duff?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I asked him when I did the very first talk on this at his group, Bristol Dowsers, and I asked him, had he ever done any dowsing on the tour? And he said, yeah, and drew me a quick diagram. And when I got this informant telling me this story, I thought, well, that sounds familiar. And I was searching through drawers for ages. Eventually, I found Rory's diagram, and it confirms several of the things about this story. Rory did find two passageways coming off of behind the White Spring, and some of the other things that he drew on that diagram, which are in the book, they correspond to the story from the description that I've had from 40 years ago. So I was pretty impressed with that. But apart from, so he found there's these two passageways that come off from behind the White Spring. One of them goes parallel to the road and then comes out at the top of the hill somewhere that's yet to be identified, and the other one goes right across deeply under the tor and comes out on the other side where Rory's marked a hidden exit. Now, I know the rough area where it is, but yes, we've still got to locate exactly where. Now, that same informant that told me, that went down there 40 years ago, told me also that he had been taken up to near the Eggstone, and somebody had shoveled away some earth there, revealing part of some blocks in the shape of an arch. And on the top of the, what was written? Hang on, I'll just refer to my picture here. On the top, the keystone on this arch, there was a G and an S. Now, he then said that they didn't go any further in, but they filled it all up afterwards. But he went back later and did some remote viewing and said that he'd gone in and remotely into this with using remote viewing techniques, and it's sort of seen that it was set out like a tomb, and that there was something golden in there and a kind of grave, but then some giant badger had So like a demonic badger had chased him out of there.
Oh.
And then you've got another story. I mean, I don't know if you can find the picture I've got. And there's an aerial view of the tour there with lots of labels on it. There's about 9 stories to do with possible tunnels on the tour. And that's the one, yes. So if you where it says Tor Hill Tunnel number 6, somewhere around there, that's in the stretch of houses along Coursing Batch to Ashwell Lane. There was reported to be some gardeners doing some work in the back garden, and they uncovered a doorway leading into the side of the Tor. And they got the door open and went down there, and they got chased out by something horrible, like something not entirely physical. And they then blocked it all up again. And these are the kind of stories you keep coming up against. There's another myth that keeps coming up about dogs that are put down in one place and come up in another place. I think that the origin of that may well be that a story Bly Bond was told by a local that to do with that one that supposedly goes to Street. That's a shepherd lost a lamb down there, but now it's like, a Jack Russell went down and it came up several miles away the following week, But that one in particular refers to the longest tunnel legend that there is to Ebba Gorge. There's a couple of standing stones up there called Deer Leap stones, and there's supposedly a tunnel that goes from there to Glastonbury Tor, you see, and a dog went down it and came up the next following week in Glastonbury. But I went up there and had a look around, and there are caves in the woods there, actually, and I managed to get into one and dug around in it. Couldn't find a way through, but there's also there's a load of rubbish in the woods there, which is it would take weeks to excavate it. I reckon that there might be one underneath all that rubbish. But there's also a mine shaft in the area as well. So, it's funny how these. I couldn't believe that there's a tunnel that goes that distance. I mean, it's hard to believe the street one, and yet I managed to find the other end of it, and it took me 26 minutes to get down that one, actually, because it's not actually that. I mean, there's a map of that as well. The Clark's archive department allowed me to look at all their archives. When in about 1950 through to 58, they had archaeologists and geologists and bat expert, all sorts of people down there. And the way that they've realised the way that this bit of tunnel's constructed, and it was connected with monks as well. Was that because the construction of the geology around here is blue lias, where you've got layers of limestone with shale in between, so it's much easier to dig horizontally rather than as in the Abbey they did the tunnels mainly by a trench, where you dug a trench and then put slabs on top. But in the Tor and in the other end of that one in Street, they've done it. Well, the one in Street anyway. They found where they dug down. Isn't that those frogs?
Yeah, mate.
You got those frogs. They dug downwards by in about 4 positions, and then they would excavate horizontally. When they got to the shale layer, they then excavate horizontally, but dig down through the layer of limestone to get to the shale. Then they had to sort of try and find the last bit of the tunnel and join up to it. So as a result, when you look at it, an aerial view, not that you can see it from the air, but a plan view, I mean, it sort of goes all over the place. And the archaeologists were all arguing about what the purpose of it was, because I mean, you can see that there's a proper entrance way, which is and the first part of that tunnel is it's designed for people to go down. They weren't arguing about that, and with the dissolution coming up, and they like to have escape routes, the monks. And
of course, I would, yeah.
I think they had quite a few, didn't they?
But the trouble is, it took, I think, the fourth, when they discovered the fourth of these excavation holes, it's about 1958. That picture there is that's the St Edmund's Well. That's up behind the cemetery in Glastonbury, which since that photo's taken, it has been blocked in, covered up by the council with a notice saying that it's health and safety, and you're not allowed to live in it. Because there were some teenagers who were having parties there, and there was broken beer bottles in front of it and such like. But there was a bat when I went in there. There was a little bat hanging from the roof. So the council shouldn't have blocked that up. The bat preservation people will have something to say about that. And that's the view from inside the chamber. They're looking up the little tunnel. And I just went up there to excavate that, and that's when I found they blocked it up. So at the moment, yeah, somebody I know who has been up that bit thinks there's evidence that there was a chamber at the end there which apparently blocked.
There's a bit of competition now.
Pardon?
Let's give the dogs a voice. Right.
Regarding that one in street. Yeah.
I just.
It goes down to, I was say, after the fourth one, it goes down to 1 foot wide. So after the fourth place where they found it was excavated, at that point where it goes underneath the road in the street, it's only a 1 foot wide conduit. So although the first bit shows evidence that it was for human traffic, the end bit is only 1 foot wide conduit. So they're saying it's dual purpose. It's the drainage out onto the marshy, but they couldn't find where people would have got out. But they then got some dowsers in, and there's a diagram that the dowsers did showing that there's possible blocked in tunnels going at right angles from the other side. And shut those frogs out. And one of these, it corresponds to the position where there was a collapse in the strawberry bed. So there's a hole indicating there might be something to these dowsing results, and that if that is the case, then there's the tunnel might then head off in a Glastonbury direction. But as you said, I can't see how it could have gone under the brew, really. But somebody, there's at least a couple of people I've met. Oh, I've met one of them. The other one was it was somebody's grandma, but they're insistent they've been down all the way from Street to Glastonbury.
You must meet many people that got stories to share about tunnels and like having cellars and how they're all interlinked. I mean, is anybody actually, with a cellar or a tunnel underneath anywhere started knocking through, or have you got to be very careful with rules and regulations?
Or what you mean? Current in current times. Well,
Yeah.
well, I think I know somebody who's convinced that there is a tunnel under his house. I haven't seen him since before the lockdown, though. And he was intending to dig up the whole floor and have a look, but it would have been quite a big job. But I will maybe report on that in the near future.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been down. You know that deli you go in. What's it called? My Fine Deli.
Yeah.
There's a well in the basement underneath there, which goes down to the what's the name of that stream? Down Silver Street. There's what's the name of it? Lambrook Stream. There you are. Oh, is it going to be back to front if I do that? I think it is, isn't it? Yeah. Oh no. No. So down there, Lambrook Stream comes down off of the hill there and goes all the way down. Down behind the assembly rooms under there and right down there and then down Benedict Street. They're said to be, I don't know, 6 foot deep, a massive amount of sediment in there, which should contain interesting stuff. But that well in My Fine Deli is believed to go right down onto that stream. But one of the problems is that it'll probably cause a horrible smell if they did unblock it. That's what happened with the. That's why it's blocked up in the Georgian Pilgrim, in the basement of the Georgian Pilgrim there, where the one that the abbot is said to have gone down ad purganos renis, which means in order to purge his loins. That's I forgot what I was going to say about it now. But there's the caretaker told me that he's convinced that tunnel originally continued out the back of the Georgian Pilgrim into the where the entrance to the car park is, and he got a friend of his up there with the ground penetrating radar and found that there seemed to be a buried spiral staircase right where the cars go into the car park there behind the Georgian Pilgrim. So yeah, I've got a diagram a bit like that amongst the ones I sent you, where it shows possible routes of where that tunnel goes, because Bligh-Bond was convinced that, judging by the trajectory of it, because he got the Bond went down in the basement of the GMP, it was just called the George, I think, and he got them to allow him to make a hole in the wall, and he found the tunnel, and it seemed to be pointing directly towards the Abbey entrance. So he presumed that that's where it went, but and then when he went to where that building called St Dunstan's House, where the Pilgrim's Reception Centre is now, in the basement there the owner there was having some, back in Bligh-Bond's day, had some alterations done in the basement to try and put a drain in, and they'd broken through into a passageway. and they found an old lamp in it, and the owner told them to block it up. So Bond didn't actually get to see that; he just heard about it. But he presumed that went towards the Georgian Pilgrim. But I've been down in that basement, and I've met the people that live there, and I spent quite a bit of time in the basement trying to find evidence of where this tunnel is, and because the previous resident told me that a hole appeared in the little shed they had in the garden just next door. A hole appeared in the floor, and he dropped a bamboo cane down and it disappeared. So he got a fibre optic and stuck it down there. You see an arched tunnelway coming from the basement in the direction, he said, of the Glastonbury experience, and not towards the Georgian Pilgrim. So that implies that it's actually quite a different direction. But as I say, I was banging on all the walls. I couldn't find any evidence of anything coming off basement walls. But I realised that that's the diagram. So it must be on the next level down, where they put the grill in the floor. It must be down the next level. So if you've got the back passage there at the top points to a little white dot. That's where the buried stairwell is. That's it, in the car park entrance there. That would have then gone into the pub, and at the front of the pub, see, the entrance in the basement is right under the window seat in the front of the pub there. Now, GP2AG, that's the Abbott's Gateway is AG. That's where you see, that was the direction that Bond thought it went in, but the SDH, that's the St Dunstan's house. That's where the basement is, which I went in, and so it was presumed to go straight across the GMP. But the information I then got from the previous residents shows it going around that curved path there, because he said it curves around to the left when he put his fibre optic down, and then it either goes to the North Gatehouse NGH or to St Patrick's Chapel, which is SPC. So those seem to be the most likely places that it would have gone to, given the new information.
So if you could have the choice of knocking a wall down anywhere and investigating, where would be the key?
Well, yeah, I think actually the most interesting of all these tunnels is the one is called the Great Drain, or the main drain, inside the Abbey grounds. That's the third one that I went down. There are some pictures out there, sort of rectangular looking, because in the Abbey grounds, I said they dug the tunnels by digging a trench and then putting flat slabs on the top. And there's this structure in the Abbey grounds called the Reredotor, which is the washroom, sort of rhombus-shaped structure. And on the east side, you've got the inlet coming down from the Chalice stream. And then you've got these two sort of trenches where the water would flow around through the washroom and it goes out the other end. That's it. You can see it in the middle there, the Reredotor, that rhombus-shaped thing. So you've got the supply in number 11 on the right there was like two little archways. This by the way is only about 5 years old from the this diagram from the study done by Reading University with ground penetrating radar and magnetic surveys. So the water came in there, and they've definitely mapped that out. And then it went out at number 2. That's the where it came out of. Now Blythe Bond discovered all that, and he had one of his students went down there for about 60 yards. Now, I discovered a manhole cover on that stretch there, only probably about a third of the way. Maybe it's where the end of the black bit and the start of the blue bit is just above the number 2 there. That's roughly where the manhole cover is. And yes, I got down, photographed down there, jumped down, took some photographs back up towards the grill where the water comes out from that washroom. And if you then turn round inside the manhole and look the other way, there's another little grill, and that points down towards that green dotted area there. That is the most interesting tunnel in town, as far as I'm concerned, because what these spectral monks said is that in that stretch somewhere, I mean, they didn't even say it straight. It was even so, the way they worded it was still sort of fairly contorted and secretive. But a lot of the missing stuff that Henry VIII didn't get his hands on, all the presumably maybe even the solid gold altar gates, are down that stretch somewhere. And it's a drain. It drained the water out, and it served the almshouses. You can see on the left there. Not quite sure the exact trajectory. It may have gone behind them, but those two little the green dotted line goes right between two. Only one of those groups of houses still exists. The other lots are knocked down now, but it's behind St Catherine's. Is it St Catherine's Chapel down there? No, St Margaret's Chapel, I think. But so it could be that in that stretch there. I mean, it must still be whether or not you can actually get down it is another question. But it's still open because there's a grill to drain all the water out of the washroom, and it goes down there. The water goes down there, and you can see where it's washed old crisp packets up against the grill. So it's all going somewhere. So. I reckon off the side of there somewhere, maybe a secret chamber which they've blocked in with all the goodies in there.
That would be a find, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So just to summarise, what we've got here is tunnels. That are for evacuation of the monks when anything of any untoward acrimony from King Henry VIII, so they could shoot through under the tunnels and get out. And also the fact that those tunnels could also be duplicit in the fact that they are used to bring water out and just let their excess grey water out. So they
I mean, it's a perfect place to hide something. Actually, that stretch, because it's the sewer. Nobody's going to want to look down there, are they? No, not in those days.
No, true. So this leads us on to the your first book that you wrote about. We'll forget the first book. You actually went on to go on to about the long lost Glastonbury sapphire. And that's
I was going to get to that. Carry on.
Yes. During my investigation of the treasure that used to be owned by the Abbey, I came across this story of a sapphire altar that was famous for doing miracle cures, and it was said to have been given by the Patriarch of Jerusalem to St David, who then presented it to the Abbey, and then it was on display in. Well, it was certainly at some point on display in St Mary's Chapel for many years. I think when the Danes invaded, they hid it away, and then we had Henry de Blois, one of the abbots, who was also the grandson of William the Conqueror. He also became the Bishop of Salisbury. I don't know, was it, or Winchester? I forgot now. Basically, he is said to have discovered this buried behind one of the doors or somewhere. Anyway, he discovered this sapphire altar and then decorated it with gilt and silver and precious stones, and then it was hung up in the St Mary's Chapel for several years, until then we had the threat of Henry's mob coming down, and so it was hidden away again. And they took the abbot up to the Tower of London to try and get him to tell them where the stuff was buried. And I think Pollard, one of the few things that's recorded, because he had a bit of a kangaroo court trial after that, and they said he would be tried and hung at Glastonbury. You know, like they decided what the outcome of the trial was before they even had it. Anyway, the Pollard said that the abbot Whiting would tell of no more gold. And then while they had him up in the Tower of London, they then discovered a couple of vaults with stuff in that had been concealed. So some of that stuff, everything that they took away from there is recorded. So we know that a lot of stuff wasn't taken away by them because it's not in that record. And unfortunately, about 3 days after they had this horrible execution of the abbot and the sacristan and the treasurer, the three people who knew where the good stuff was, they then discovered, there's three different accounts of where, but basically around the doorway of the chapel, St Mary's Chapel, they found this sapphire altar, and it's listed amongst the items taken away by Henry VIII's law. And then nothing more is heard of it until, well, obviously somebody at some point started a rumour that it must be amongst the crown jewels. If it was taken away by the and given to Henry VIII, this massive sapphire must be amongst the crown jewels, and it's conjectured that it is the same sapphire that's in the back of the crown that Queen Elizabeth was wearing when she was crowned in 52. And when you look into that, it's called the Stuart sapphire. You look into the history of that, it's got a very dodgy sounding history, which you can trace back definitely to about 1660 when it was sold or acquired by the royalty. But its track record before that is very murky. Anyway, so the whole idea of this book was to try and pour more light on that whole story, going back to the original Latin accounts. And this is the trouble with it, all these early accounts are in Latin, and if you try and get decent Latin translations, they end up being quite different from each other, and you can be quite easily misled. So yeah, I've included a lot of the Latin original accounts there for scholars of Latin. Yeah, I won't tell you my conclusions, or that will spoil the excitement of reading about it.
Well, they're great little books. I mean, they're small, but my gosh, they're packed with so much information. And for people that
I got my inspiration. I got my inspiration for the design from Wooden Books, who used to be based in Glastonbury, and I did a book for them called Mayan and Other Ancient Calendars. And I mean, the information in there is so tiny, really. Some bit you need a magnifying glass, but it's so perfect format for this town because little pocket-sized books that are nice and cheap. That's what they've done well here. So I put them out self-published, make it as everything as cheap as possible, and I think those two subjects, the sapphire and the underground stuff, I do like to try and find things nobody's delved into before, just with my motorcycle projects, weird kind of things that nobody's managed to achieve before, like a V-twin Panther or a sidecar that's that my next project is a sidecar with a thatched cottage on the side.
I was looking at your pictures of the different bikes. I mean, they're obviously real classics. So I mean, I don't know anything about bikes, so I haven't got a clue. But they look really, classics. So what sort of age? The one that you've got now, the latest picture. How old is it?
The latest picture, which well, do you mean the V-twin Panther, or do you?
Yeah.
I think so. The oldest one I've got is most of it's 1938 and the engine's 1927. But it's a 1938. I mean, when I do these talks, I quite often have like an interlude in the middle where I start talking about these motorbikes, and some people can't handle it. No, a couple of people walk out, and I don't go on for long about it. Yes, a 1938, just pre-war M20 is the main bike, which they made loads of them in World War II, so there's lots of spares. But the 1938 model, they only made it for 2 years, and it's hand gear change, so it's sacrilegious towards BSA aficionados, really, because I've instead of restoring it to its original, I mean, I've got the original engine, which is completely seized up, but it looks so much better with this 1000cc V-twin flathead engine in it, which came, incidentally, from the front of a three-wheel Morgan. Yeah, it's a great bike. It just makes me laugh every time I ride it. And then, I've got a Panther, which is 56.
Let's get back on
1956 Panther. Sorry?
Yeah. Yeah, what about the Mayan calendars that you've written?
Yeah, that's the wooden book. I was talking about wooden books run by John Martineau. He's left town now, but a great series of books. If you go in the bookshops, you'll find like this contraption where you can spin it round, and it's got all the various titles of knowledge. Lost knowledge is what it's all about. Stuff you can't find anywhere else.
Yeah, I got a few
and they use old. Yeah, they use old books and illustrations, which you can use because they're not governed by copyright after 50 years, which makes things much easier. That there, which you can see, is that's the book that was a follow-on book from, which is this. Mysteries of the Long Count. That was kind of follow-on book from that book you just saw, the one about the Mayan calendars. But I came up with a theory. It's actually in the book. I didn't do many of these books because hardly anyone understands it. But there's a fold out at the back of the book there, which has got that there we are, the diagram on it, which it kind of like concentrates all the discoveries in the book which lead up to that. But it's there on the back of the book. You can see, for example, that where is it? There's that's one of the inscriptions that's never been explained. Well, my theory with that diagram sort of explains that. I mean, it's incredibly complicated because each one of those, down one side you've got 20-fold cycles, and down the other side you've got 13-fold cycles. And so the idea is that there's three ways that dates can be recorded. One of the other ways is on the front of the book there, which is like a historical way of describing dates. Then you've got what I call the parahistoric and the metahistoric, two other ways of describing dates, where you go up the dials and then turn to one side and go up the other side. It just seems to make sense of those inscriptions. And although I only had about 35 of these printed, and I only sold about half of those, most of the people that bought it you've got to really have had some study on calendars first, before, otherwise you get smoke coming out your ears. But I got some great comments from academia, which so this is the I mean, I'm most proud of this book, of everything I've done, because I managed to get some good comments from academia in this subject, and they're usually very critical of anybody who's not in their part of their little group. But for example, Mark Stone, Dr. Mark Van Stone, Maya specialist epigrapher in San Diego. I must say your article on the 13 Bacton versus 20 Bacton cycle is very good, especially I find your recapitulation of the history of the 13 Bacton idea excellent. Have you submitted it to scholarly journals or even, say, archaeology? And that's that. Yeah, I've got a few of those, and then I've got this one from Tree Frog. It's a complex issue. Anyone who manages to get through Geoff Stray's very impressive article and retain their sanity will have to agree that is certainly an understatement. You can actually read that online free of charge, because I wanted to get this circulating. So I put it online free of charge. If you go to my website, find the page for this book, there's a link on there where you can read the whole thing free. Yeah. Right. But as I say, it's best if you've read my previous book or some other book about Maya calendars first, in order to get you ready for it.
Mm.
Let's come to the first book, Beyond 2012. Yeah. Yes, that's the one that started this all off, and it was a study that went on for about 25 years. That's the USA edition. The English edition is called, the subtitle is Catastrophe or Ecstasy, but the USA publisher didn't like it being having the word ecstasy in it because it sounds all druggy. But it's got nothing to do with that kind of ecstasy. It's as I explain somewhere in the book, the use of that word is to do with the Greek origin of the word ecstasy is ecstasis, which means standing outside yourself. It's about out-of-body experience. And the evidence that I follow in the book there suggests that a possible that the movement of, I mean, this is all from various scientific sources, but the slow movement of the solar system into an area of a sort of cloud of charged plasma could have a side effect of, because we have magnetite in the pineal gland, it could cause a secretion of a hallucinogen, an endogenous hallucinogen, which we all have the potential of secreting, called dimethyltryptamine, and that can give out-of-body experiences and telepathy. One of these in the ayahuasca brew, they've got DMT combined with harmine, and harmine, when it was first discovered, was called telepathine because of its ability to provoke telepathy in people. Right.
Anyway, of course, that was all to do with prophecy, and it all seemed that, you know, these stories I was hearing from different parts of the world to do that something was going to be happening around the year 2012, and that's what that whole book was investigating. And I'm still trying to work out what it was all about, you know. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was expecting by 2016 that it would all become clear. I mean, a lot of people were making catastrophic forecasts to do with 2012, and I investigated all that stuff, and I found that it was much more likely, and it seemed much more convincing that the whole thing was the start of a paradigm shift, and that it could be explained more in neurochemistry seemed to explain it better than catastrophic interpretations. But obviously, it's if it was onto anything at all there, then it's happening slower. I mean, I was never expecting it all to happen on the 21st of December 2012 anyway, but I thought that the process would be recognizable within about 4 years, mainly because 2016 is the point where the sun is crossing the galactic equator, and it takes 36 years to cross it because the sun's half a degree wide, and it goes 72 years for 1 degree of movement on precessional cycle. So if you position the sun every year over 36 years, it's slowly crossing the galactic equator, even though you can't see it in the daytime because, you know, at nighttime you can work it out by the center line of the Milky Way. But that seems, by John Major Jenkins's all the work he did, that seems to be what donated the timing of the 5,000 year 13 Bacton cycle of the Maya civilization. So it was a coincidence of that initially with information from the I Ching on the other side of the world that seemed to have this termination point within 34 days of the other one, and they're both cycles that were thousands of years old. That's what set me off on that exploration.
Right.
Yeah. Next.
Next. Right. Well, that's the next picture. Right. I wanted to ask you about, you've written a book about your stories of, I forgot what the title is now, but of being a bus driver and all the the odd people that you met. And so share a couple of things about that. Your Mendit Madness, that's it.
Mendit Madness. Yes. Yeah, I've been doing that in this area for about 15 years. And yes, as you know, there are a lot of colourful people around here. And
that's what happens when you get that scrumpy.
There are various things. I tend to go into it. Exactly. Yes. Some of these stories are, a lot of it does involve people who've had a drink, and but some of them involve me going into a sort of slight reverie, and one of those stories got picked up by the Vicky's website, you know, a Normal for Glastonbury, and from there it got onto a couple of the newspapers in Bristol, and then eventually I did an interview for Radio Bristol on it as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm not very good at telling the stories. I'm much better at writing them, I find.
You must have one to share.
Sorry?
I said you must have one you can
what
share.
Did you say?
Before we go. You must have one that you could share that stands out above the rest.
Well, yeah, there's I pulled up one day outside Temple Meads, and I had a full busload of people, and there was a guy standing in a three-piece suit there, and it's like a silver sheen on it, and he was the last one on the bus, and he just walked past me, flashed something like that, and then walked down the bus, and I went, sorry, I didn't see your ticket. And he came back and splattered it up against the screen, and then started to get all offended that I'd you know, So he's saying that I'd offended him by in front of all these people, you know, making out that he was trying to get a free ride. I said, no. I'm just treating the same as everybody else. Everybody has to show their ticket, you know, and if you don't show your ticket, then you never know. Somebody's going to think, oh, look, he doesn't look at people's tickets. But, you know, it's not personal against anybody. You just, if you don't look at people's tickets, everybody ends up getting on for nothing. And then, you know, that doesn't work. So, but he got really uppity about it. And as I was driving off, and he was going on about it, saying, you know, he was really offended and this sort of thing. And I said, look, you're not supposed to talk to people while the vehicle's in motion. I'll stop the bus and stop the bus. And I said, look, can we sort of forget about this and just keep driving? No, we can't. I said, well, I'll have to kick you off the bus then. He says, oh, yeah. How are you going to do that then? I said, well, I'll ring the police and get them to do it. And he says, oh, go on then. I'm looking forward to this. And so I started trying to dial the police. And he tried then to start to smash the screen between me and him by punching it with his hand. It was quite hard, you know. And of course, then that put me off a bit, and then I had to start dialing again. And then he did it again. And then when he'd done it the third time, I think he then overbalanced, sort of fell out the door, and I quickly tried to shut the door, but he jumped back on again. And then he hit the screen for a fourth time. And somebody goes, oh, for God's sake, get off the bus. And he went, who said that? And then he started going down the bus looking for the person who'd shouted this out. And so I thought, oh, God, this is going to get something serious. And so I thought I got to distract him. So I said, have you just escaped from a mental hospital? And then, of course, it worked. He came back round and tried to smash the screen 2 more times with his hand. And those screens are designed to break all the bones in your hand before they crack, you see, because they just sort of bend and spring back again. And then I'm still trying to dial the police like this. And suddenly it just sort of, it's like something had got, some light had come on his head, and he just turned around and got off the bus. I quickly shut the doors and drove off, and he's kind of going like this to it. Well, he's going like that, actually, to be honest. So, yeah, that's one of them.
Yeah. Oh, one of many, like you say, many colourful characters in Glastonbury and around.
Yeah.
Right, anything you want to...
So
Geoff, Oz?
I've only got about seven stories to. I mean, people ask me if I'm going to do a follow-up, but I've only got about 7 stories so far, because that was about 10 years worth of stories to get those 25 stories together. So I may a couple of them were from other drivers in there. So I might ask around, see if I can find some more stories from other drivers so I can do a follow up.
I'm sure.
Have you had any hens parties? Hens party girls? Hens nights?
Yeah. Oh dear.
Ain't taking any of the hen. You doing any? Have you carded any of those girls on a hens night? No. None there. Hello. All right. Hey, might just close it up now, Andrena, right?
Yeah, have we lost Geoff? Seems to have frozen.
Oh, here he is. He's back. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Geoff. It's been an absolute pleasure, and so interesting about all these tunnels. And God, there's just so much more that we don't know about. So it's been a real pleasure listening to you sharing, because I really wanted to know more about these tunnels. You know, because I've lived in Glastonbury as well, and I dip in and out. It's sort of always fascinated me. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us.
All right, I lost you for a minute there. I'm back now. Right. Okay, pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, very good. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.